Hi, I'm State Comptroller DiNapoli. Happy Pride. Welcome to our fourth Office of State Comptroller LGBTQ Pride celebration. It's great to join with all of you, both the guests we're going to have for this celebration, and certainly all of you that are joining us online. We're glad you could be with us. As we celebrate 2023 Pride Month, we've come a long way in the fight for LGBTQ plus rights. In 2023, there are now thousands of Pride marches and festivals in cities and towns throughout our state, the nation, and around the world, where millions recognize the tremendous contributions of LGBTQ plus individuals, celebrate queer and trans identity, and stand in solidarity in the ongoing fight against discrimination and injustice. We've seen some tremendous gains in very recent times: passage of the Federal Hate Crimes Prevention Act, historic Supreme Court rulings that have affirmed marriage equality and ensured LGBTQ workplace protections. Here in our own great state of New York, we've finally won historic passage of gender and the ban on conversion therapy and banning so-called gay panic defense in murder cases. This builds on the great history we have in New York with laws like SONDA, of course, marriage equality, the Dignity for All Students Act, and other great legislative achievements. I think we've all been very, very proud that this is certainly one area where New York State, in terms of our laws, legislative action, we truly have been a leader. Yet, as we have this Pride celebration in 2023, we know that there's also a disturbing backdrop that's out there. In fact, the New York Times just recently reported on a survey or a report that found nationally, just in recent months, there were 350 anti-LGBTQ incidents, harassment, vandalism, assaults. My guess is that's an underreporting of what's been going on. And as we well know, we're in the midst of a relentless wave of attacks through laws, state laws, targeting queer and trans children and their families as well. In 2023, more than 520 of such bills, legislative proposals, have come forward, 220 of which specifically target trans and non-binary children and adults. 70 of them have actually passed and been enacted into law. Now, fortunately, our democratic institutions are standing firm in the midst of these undemocratic assaults. A federal judge, for example, in Arkansas just voided that state's ban on gender-affirming care, one in a series of court decisions rejecting anti-queer and trans laws. Here in New York, we continue to legislate in a better way. The state legislature has just passed the Trans Safe Haven Law that will shield parents who come to New York, to our state, to seek gender-affirming care for their children. We're proud that New York is a destination state for trans families fleeing their homes. In these challenging times, all of us, whatever our role, must continue to be engaged and be vigilant. We need to continue to stand together and fight back. And that certainly includes our work at the New York State Comptroller's Office. As many of you know, I'm trustee of the State Pension Fund, and in that position, I continue to leverage my role as an institutional investor to push companies we invest in to change their policies and protect all workers from discrimination and encourage inclusive leadership on corporate boards. I do this because it makes good business sense and it protects our investments, our pension fund investments, for the long term. Most recently, I've been working with the Human Rights Campaign to get business leaders to sign HRC's Count Us In pledge. By signing the pledge, companies reaffirm their support for the LGBTQ plus community, including access to affirming health care, and promise to oppose anti-LGBTQ plus laws. I sent a letter to CEOs of the 30 largest companies and 25 companies located in states where numerous anti-queer and anti-trans laws have been introduced, commending them for signing on to the pledge or encouraging those to sign on to it. I will continue to stand with the LGBTQ plus community to ensure that every person has the right to live freely in their chosen gender identity, the right to hold a job, and the right to raise their queer and trans children with dignity, respect, and access to the health care they need. New York has long been a beacon of hope to the LGBTQ plus people and community. We need to shine that light brightly, that beacon, that bright light, now for those who are under attack in other states across the country, and those who are feeling under attack right here in our own state. As we celebrate Pride Month and all it represents, we must refocus and recommit to the battles that no doubt are still ahead. I'm pleased to be joined here at the Brooklyn Public Library, this magnificent institution in this wonderful borough, with some very special honorees and individuals that we're going to be acknowledging today. Each of them have stepped up in their own way, and they are inspiring us with their commitment to make life better and safer for all people, including queer and trans New Yorkers. I'm very pleased, as part of our 2023 Pride celebration, to welcome our first honoree and our first guest, and that, of course, is the Honorable Crystal Hudson, New York City Council member, and actually we're having this discussion in the Council Members Council District. So it really is great to be here once again at the Brooklyn Public Library. So let me tell you a little bit about this honoree. Crystal Hudson is the council member for New York City's District 35 in Brooklyn, representing the neighborhoods of Prospect Heights, Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, and parts of Crown Heights and Bedford-Stuyvesant. She was elected in 2021 and made history as one of the first out gay Black women ever elected in New York City. Crystal is a community organizer and public servant committed to making government more accessible for people and delivering a just recovery for all New Yorkers in the wake of the global pandemic and in the wake of our economic crisis, and of course, all the issues around racial reckoning. She has a particular concern for senior citizens and is chair of the Council Committee on Aging. As co-chair of the Council LGBTQIA+ caucus, Crystal Hudson has taken a leadership role in crafting the Marsha and Sylvia Plan, a long-term policy agenda to make New York a more just and equitable city for queer and trans New Yorkers. Crystal formerly served as co-director of Community Outreach Unit at the New York City Council, first deputy public advocate of community engagement at the Office of the Public Advocate, and chief of operations to the majority leader of the City Council. A lot of impressive titles that are very long, but I think we got them all out. In March of 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Crystal founded Greater Prospect Heights Mutual Aid and rooted the group's work in core principles of mutual aid learned from people of African descent and those who are indigenous and native to the United States. For 2 years, this organization worked to meet the needs of neighbors experiencing food insecurity and economic instability due to the COVID-19 pandemic, especially our seniors and those with underlying health conditions. Wow, welcome, Crystal. You've got a lot of work already done and a lot of work that's ongoing. And let me first start off by saying congratulations. You were married recently, I heard.
Yes, and also expecting a baby.
Double congratulations, that's great. Good for you.
Thank you so much.
You have an incredible background in public service and in community work, but I know you also worked in marketing and advertising.
I did.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what was your career path to end up, transitioning from advertising to community service to wanting to seek elective office.
Absolutely. So I worked in sports marketing and advertising, and then my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. I was the only child of a single parent, and moved back home, moved in with my mother, cared for her for over 8 years before she passed a couple years ago. And really it was through that experience as a caregiver where I saw firsthand how incredibly difficult it is for so many regular working families like mine to get access to services, to resources, and even just basic information at times, to navigate bureaucracy and the healthcare system and all of those things. And so I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make it easier for other families coming after me who might have similar experiences, and that's what got me into public service.
And giving back in so many ways. You have such an incredible presence in the community, in the district, and you're one of the rare people that everybody has a good word to say about you. I've never heard anything negative. because of the way you approach people and the care and compassion that comes through. But that being said, you are a trailblazer, one of the first out gay Black women to run for office, be successful, to be elected. Tell us a little bit about that path. What was that like? What were the challenges there? Are there still challenges in terms of who you are and what you bring to public service?
Yeah, I mean, there are always challenges. A lot of the experience I had on the campaign trail, I faced racism, sexism, homophobia, all of the things. And the one story that I usually share that I think was one of the most homophobic experiences that I had on the campaign trail was when somebody said to me that they've always ever been represented by straight people, and why should they be represented by somebody who's queer identified, such as myself, and how could I possibly represent their interests as a straight person? And I said, well, I've always ever been represented by straight people, right? And so, but those people, some of whom have, certainly represented my interests, and you don't have to share every single identity with somebody. I have a very, very diverse district, and I'm proud to represent all the people in my district. And I'm proud to be one of the first out gay Black women elected. And I think my district has spoken. My district said that they were ready for this type of leadership and ready for the representation that I bring to the table.
That's great. We mentioned at the outset that you're co-chair of the City Council's LGBTQIA caucus.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the work of the caucus. And I mentioned the Marsha and Sylvia plan. Mm-hmm. Our viewers may not be familiar with that, so tell us a little bit about what that entails. Absolutely.
So first off, the caucus is one of the most diverse LGBTQIA+ caucuses that we've seen in the City Council. We're a majority women. The council is a majority women, but also the caucus is a majority women. Both co-chairs are women, myself and Councilmember Tiffany Caban from Queens. And so we released the Marsha and Sylvia plan, named after, of course, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, who were trailblazers in the LGBTQIA+ community. And we've been working on this plan for almost a year. We wanted to make sure we got it right. We wanted to make sure that it hit all of the areas. And we know every issue is a queer or LGBTQIA+ issue, everything from education to housing, healthcare, and everything in between, older adults, children. And so the plan outlines, policy initiatives, legislation, and also budget requests that pertain to every single area that affects our community.
Is that a roadmap for the rest of the country? Do you ever get calls from other states or other cities or communities in New York inquiring about what the agenda is and how others can emulate it? We
haven't gotten those calls yet, but I'm hopeful that people will call. This is the first policy plan of its kind for any municipality to put out. So we're definitely leading the way and proud to be doing so.
So those of you who are viewing, if you're not in New York City and you're interested in the plan, be in touch with the council member's office so you can learn more about it. Obviously we're seeing in other states attacks legislatively, that are happening against the community. What more can be done in response to those legislators that are, or even at a local level, some of the things that are happening? What can we in New York do to push back or provide support for brothers and sisters in other states that are really in a very different kind of community dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, just to add some context, there have been 542 bills and counting so far introduced or passed across the country. 75 bills have already been passed, which is unprecedented in a single year, and we're only halfway through the year, that are attacking the community, and in particular, trans youth. The Human Rights Campaign earlier this month declared a state of emergency. And we haven't seen that before, and I think it's because things are actually dire. I introduced a piece of legislation recently that would make New York City a safe haven for anybody seeking gender-affirming care or helping or providing that gender-affirming care. And I think that's what we have to continue to do here in New York City and all across New York State, is recommitting ourselves as a safe place, a safe haven, as somewhere where people can seek refuge, can seek the health care, the services that they need, not just from the LGBTQIA+ community, but also, when we're talking about, access to abortion and other things of that nature. You know, we need to make sure that anybody, wherever you are in the country, can come to New York and know that they are safe and that they can seek the care that they need.
Yeah. You know, another big issue out there has been unfortunately taking place in our schools and our libraries. Book banning.
Yep.
You know, one of our other honorees, as you know, has been a hero up in Carmel, New York. And the drag story hour issue has become a contentious issue, even, you know, within New York City. What's your perspective on how we get through all of that?
I think we keep showing up and leading with love, and making sure we stand in solidarity. I mean, you know, I think a lot of times we forget, especially during Pride Month with all the celebrations that we have, that Pride started as a protest and an uprising. And we need to make sure that we are ready to continue fighting against all of these, you know, predatory campaigns, predatory pieces of legislation, and make sure that we provide support also to the heroes, like you mentioned, that you're also honoring this month, who have been courageous enough to stand up. The Brooklyn Public Library, where we sit today, has certainly been a strong supporter by encouraging people in those states who have experienced book bans to be able to get access to those books, and encouraging people to still seek out those books and read those books. And I think that's what we have to continue to do, is wrapping our arms around the people that everybody else is telling, you know, they're not normal, that they shouldn't exist, and making sure that we're leading with love in that way.
You've defended a drag story hour, and I gather that agitators actually showed up at your home to protest against you for doing that. How did you find the strength to deal with that?
You know, it's just leaning on community and obviously like family and friends on a personal level, but you know, professionally, I mean, this has happened to myself and two of my other colleagues, Eric Botcher and Shekhar Krishnan, in the city council. And you know, the reality is, we think oftentimes that New York City is immune to this type of these type of attacks and this type of behavior, and we're not. And so I think that's been a big wake-up call to New Yorkers everywhere, knowing that, you know, we have a very diverse city. We love the diversity that we have here in this city, but it also means that people who have, you know, these, you know, sort of really extremist views are also here in New York City. And so we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that our community has the resources and the services when it comes to mental health care, and things like that, supporting our youth in particular, and making sure that we're investing in the community in a real and meaningful way.
I mean, just in the past few weeks, how many pride flags in the city have been torn down or burned, or whatever. Eric, you and Eric Botcher have been speaking out. I mean, it is unbelievable. And of course, as you mentioned, in our other honorees, we have Karissa O'Reilly, who's really been a hero up in Carmel, and Nick Higgins on behalf of the Brooklyn Public Library. So I think it's important for folks to know that we can stand up against these kind of assaults.
Absolutely.
And there are individuals and institutions who are there to be supportive. We only have a couple of moments left, but I just thought I'd ask maybe a broader question as someone who went from community work and staff work, you know, to be an elected official yourself. Is it very different than you thought it was going to be? You know, to actually be the person casting the vote, having to answer the constituent letter, not with somebody else's signature, but with yours.
Yep.
And having to go to all the events. I mean, it's a lot of work, right? And you do have a very diverse and dynamic district. Are you as, I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to hear you say it. Are you as enthused today as you were when you were first sworn in?
Yeah, I think I'm more enthused. And I think, you know, unfortunately, I suppose, given the you know, state of this country, I am, you know, really committed to ensuring that we're doing everything we can to uplift the community. But this work, I feel, is work that I've been called to do. Like I said, I left a career that I had in sports to do this work, and it really gives me immense pleasure. And, you know, I have a lot of gratitude for my constituents who elected me to do this work. So I'm really happy to be here.
I know they have a lot of gratitude for you being the great leader that you are, and you really are an example of how you can make a difference in public service. So
Thank you.
I know I speak for anybody that knows you and has worked with you. We're glad you are there.
Thank you.
So we're going to wrap up. We have 2 presentations, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The first one, as one of our honorees for our New York State Comptroller Pride celebration and for this conversation. I won't read all the whereases, but they're all glowing and deservedly so. But I'm very honored to present you this New York State Comptroller proclamation that really expresses our appreciation and respect for your great work. And just to let you know, we really appreciate you spending time with this conversation and inspiring everybody by your words and just to know that my team and I have great appreciation and respect for everything that you've done and who you are, and just keep at it, Crystal Hudson.
Thank you so much. This is my first proclamation.
Well,
so
oh, Lord.
Greatly appreciated.
Well,
and it is a true honor to receive it from you. So thank you.
That's great. Well, more practically, especially because of your good family news, you know, the fun thing we do in the Controller's office is manage unclaimed funds, people's lost money. So
I have some unclaimed funds?
We just have to find some unclaimed funds for Crystal Hudson.
Wonderful.
So I won't say how much because I don't want your friends calling you saying I want a piece of that. But here's a little bit of money for you.
Thank you so much. Wow.
So
can I take this one to the bank?
Well, if you got to jam it in the ATM.
Okay, all right.
But we'll make it easy and give you the paperwork that you can actually get the real money. But
awesome.
We always like to find money for our friends, and it's just to remind everybody they should go to the Office of State Comptroller website and search, and there's some money for you, Crystal.
Thank you, and I'm going to post this. Okay, I'll try not to. I'm going to post it with "I got mine."
Yeah.
Yeah. Hashtag I got mine. Thank you so much,
That was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks. Council Member Crystal Hudson. This is somebody to emulate. So especially if you're someone out there thinking, I want to do something more purposeful with my life, and maybe that's public service. This is an example of how you can do it and be very successful with great impact. Thank you, Crystal.
Thank you so much.
Our next guest and our next honoree is a real heroine in one of the fights we were just talking about as part of our conversation with Councilmember Crystal Hudson. So let me set up the context for this next honoree. As we know, one of the most insidious and growing threats involves controlling children's access to books that are queer and gender affirming. These attacks take the form of book bans and protests against drag artists who read affirming stories to kids. While protesters often get most of the attention, we don't hear a lot about the everyday heroes and heroines working to keep books and stories accessible to our children. My next guest is one of those heroines. So I'm really pleased that we could honor Karissa O'Reilly, librarian and media specialist at Carmel High School in Carmel, New York. Let me tell you a little bit about Karissa's story, what brings her to be one of our honorees for Pride 2023. In June of 2022, Karissa O'Reilly created a display of LGBTQ plus affirming books for Pride Month. When a small group of agitators heard about the display, they contacted the school superintendent demanding that several of the books be banned and that Karissa be fired from her job. Now, fortunately, Karissa is part of a strong union, NYSET, New York State United Teachers, so certainly Karissa's job was never in jeopardy, but she was hounded and she was harassed. Agitators posted her home address, phone number, and other personal details on social media. When it became clear that her position was protected, protesters began showing up at school board meetings, disrupting the meetings, and verbally abusing school board members. These protests have continued, as have toxic social media posts. Her experience has only strengthened her commitment to stand strong as an advocate for her students. Karissa has recently been taken on the role of Advocacy Chair for the School Library Media Specialists of Southeastern New York. She remains dedicated to providing a safe space where all young people in her school, and really beyond her own school, by setting this example, can learn and grow to be confident and caring adults. So Karissa, welcome to our conversation as part of Pride Month.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Well, you've got a real frontline story for what's been going on. But how about if we start, tell us about what made you want to be a librarian? What motivated you to seek that out as a career?
Sure, yeah.
And of course, now we have to say media specialist, not the old
Library
days
media
where
specialist,
it's a
right.
broader
It's
kind
a
of mandate.
Big information landscape out there, so we've got to cover it all.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm very new to this profession. I went back to school when I was almost 40 years old for my master's in library science. I went to Syracuse. I was working in a bookstore at the time, and I just loved connecting people to the stories that resonated with them. I loved the conversations that I had with them after that. And then I was also doing volunteer work with teenagers, grieving teenagers also. And one day I got an ad for this library program, and something clicked, and I thought, that just feels like the right fit for me. You know, I could do this work, I could connect people to stories, I could do this community outreach work, but in a place that is equitable and accessible to everyone. And I've loved it ever since.
That's great. I described some of the challenges you've been going through. Did you ever question your choice of career? I'm sure you never expected when you were studying library science that you'd be confronted with that kind of, I'll use the word assault, and in effect that's what it was.
Yeah. I never questioned it for a second, and if anything, I feel like the attacks made me feel more committed to the work. You know, I never expected anything of this magnitude, of course, but you know, my very first class in my library media program, my professor gave us all the library Bill of Rights, and she told us stories about, you know, times in history where there were efforts to censor books and things like that. And, you know, I went into it not realizing what a large part of the work that this is, but it's probably the most important part of the work is to make sure that our communities have access to the information that they need, that they want, that makes them feel seen, valued. So yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, Carmel, Putnam County's a beautiful community. You know, I've been there. You know, nice people. It is, you know, kind of shocking when I, you know, read what was going on and admiring your strength. But what's your view of what has been the impact of this controversy on your students, especially LGBTQ plus students? How have they reacted to all of this? Obviously, you've been managing it very strongly and well, but how have the students reacted to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you see your young people attacked directly and indirectly in this, everything going on. I think that's a hard question to answer because I think that any suffering, but especially within the LGBTQ community, a lot of it's happening behind closed doors. A lot of the suffering that our kids are feeling, I'm sure we're not seeing, because it sends the message that you're not welcome here, we don't respect you, and that's a hard thing for our kids to have to bear witness to. But I have seen, you know, I've seen kids step up, speak out at board meetings, speak out on social media, really courageously. But they will open up about feeling unwelcome and feeling scared and threatened by some of the things that are said.
Has it brought some of the students together, though? I know in many of our schools, they have these great gay straight student alliances is one of the initiatives. I don't know if you have that in your school. I mean, have you seen a coming together among the students?
Yes, and we do have a GSA in our school, and yeah, it definitely has brought them together. We've also recently developed an equity club, students who are dedicated to, you know, to equity within the school. So
I saw a wonderful quote of yours, which I'll repeat for our audience. You said, "This is not about me. It's about making sure our kids know we love and respect them and have their backs." That's a beautiful way to express your sentiments. Do you feel that you've made progress this past year in that regard?
I think so, yeah. You know, I think that quote, I think it was in response to, you know, just I feel like I've gotten a lot of attention around this whole thing, but it's really these attacks, even things that looked like they were directly at me, they weren't about me, right? They were about the books, they were about, I don't know, it feels like as educators, we all go into this field because we care about kids and because we want our kids to thrive, and we want to create environments that they can thrive in. And I think that that's what I meant when I had said that, was that, you know, our job as educators is to give them safe spaces and help them to grow.
It also made you an advocate, right?
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier that you're the advocacy chair for the School Library Media Specialists of Southeastern New York. Talk a little bit more about that advocate role.
Yeah, sure. So that's a new role that I've just taken on with them. So we're really just getting started. So it's mostly been small things so far, but I advocate for policy change for within our board policies. There could be stronger language that helps to just clarify how book challenges should be handled, and just to make sure that we keep important things on the shelves. And I've advocated for, through your office, I've met with some state senators, advocated for some bills that support library programs, school libraries, school librarians. So I feel like I'm just getting started, though.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, it's been a great conversation. Thank you for sharing your story. I think it's very inspiring. And for someone who's been through all this, you're very calm, and you certainly are a person that exudes strength and confidence, and I give you a lot of credit for that. So that's why you're one of our honorees this year for 2023. So I won't read all the whereases, but it talks about your path to being a librarian and media specialist, and the great cause that you've been a champion of, not only in Carmel, but really for librarians and media specialists all across our state and our country. So you really stand out as a role model and an example. So this proclamation is a small way to just say thank you, to wish you continued success and strength, and thank you for everything you're doing for all of your students and being a wonderful advocate.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing, and it's such an honor. Thank you.
Our next guest and honoree for our 2023 Pride celebration is not quite a person, it's an important institution. It's the Brooklyn Public Library, and that's where we are having this discussion. And the library is well represented by Nick Higgins, who's the chief librarian here at the Brooklyn Public Library. So just a reminder to everyone, Brooklyn Public Library is among the borough's most democratic civic institutions, serving patrons in every neighborhood and from every walk of life. The Brooklyn Public Library is one of the nation's largest public library systems, currently has more than 850,000 active cardholders. The Brooklyn Public Library is a recognized leader in cultural offerings, literacy, out-of-school time services, workforce development programs, and digital literacy. As book banning efforts began to spread throughout our country, the Brooklyn Public Library decided to offer library cards to any young person in the United States of America who wanted one. Initially, the idea was to make sure kids had access to frequently banned books, which often contain vital information about the history and culture of queer and trans people, Black, brown, and Asian people, and pivotal examples of historic oppression, such as the institution of slavery and the Holocaust. The library is deeply committed to fostering the connections between reading and learning, raising children who know and respect themselves, and forming young adults who grow to build healthier, stronger communities. So it is a privilege on behalf of the library to welcome Nick Higgins, who is the chief librarian here at the Brooklyn Public Library.
Thank you, Tom. That's a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much.
And thank you for hosting us.
Of course, definitely.
And congratulations. I just found out a few moments ago that you and your team have been nationally recognized by the Library Journal, named Librarians of the Year. That's a great honor.
Yeah, it was a great honor to be recognized for the work that we're so proud of doing, and it really was a team effort. I think that the entire Books Unbanned team, our program that we're kind of launching for young people across the country, it was such a system-wide effort. There are so many hands in this, and so many people sort of like galvanized around this idea of expanding the right to read and protecting people wherever they're seeing book bans and censorship.
This is such an incredible place. I hadn't been here for a while, so when I walked in, I forgot. Wow, yeah. I mean, it really blows you away. So for you professionally in this chosen field, this is the best gig to have, right?
There's no better job. I love my job. It's such an honor to be leading this organization, the public service, the collections, like our touch points with the community. It really means so much, and I'm just really privileged to be in this position and lead these efforts. Yeah.
Well, apropos of our discussion, when you and your team first became aware of these book banning efforts and that they were really increasing, Did you ever imagine that that trend would take hold in so many places across our country?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of a surprise, but we saw, some of the writing on the wall. I mean, we're a library. We've been around for 125 years. Like from our beginning, we've had books being challenged and banned, and people wanting certain titles to be removed from the shelves. But this one really struck us as something different. I mean, we kind of understood pretty early on that this wasn't just like your run-of-the-mill kind of like book challenge from a concerned parent or a citizen from a community. It was really targeted and really organized, like a campaign that really focused in on LGBTQ communities, authors, writers, Black, Indigenous authors, and those stories that represented people who just wanted to learn a little bit more about themselves, who were sort of exploring their own identities. And for us, very early on, we knew that the books were just a vehicle to something much darker, much more sinister, pernicious. It was really about making sure that people felt like they didn't belong in the community. Certain people didn't belong in the community. So as a library, as a leader in this field, we thought it was our obligation, our responsibility, and to stand up and push back best we could.
So tell us more about the program to give library cards out to young people across the nation. I mean, talk about an ambitious response to what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, originally we wanted to make sure that we were, helping people where they were. Here in Brooklyn, we don't have a whole lot of, as far as we're in charge, we're not going to have a whole lot of book bans or book challenges coming through. But not everyone is so lucky. I mean, there are young people who are living in states where the entire sort of like power of the state government is being marshaled to essentially codify censorship efforts in legislation. And for some young people in smaller communities across the country, I mean, they have nowhere else to turn. We felt like we wanted to make sure that they had an intervention, they had some support from us. So we decided to offer any young person aged 13 to 21 in the country a free digital e-card for the Brooklyn Public Library. So if they received this card, they could access over 500,000 ebooks and audiobooks from the Brooklyn Public Library collection. It could be banned books, or it could just be any book that they want to read. We wanted to demonstrate that this is how libraries should be, this is how civil society should be, and your right to access information in the way that you want to access is yours. It's your privilege. So that was our intervention. We started out and we didn't think that it would be a campaign that we needed to keep going for very long, but we received thousands of
I was going to say, what was the response?
Yeah, no, the response was, it was robust. I mean, we, again, received, emails from young people, from parents, from educators, from librarians, wanting to have access to a card. Heartbreaking stories from kids across the country who, are in communities where they feel very isolated and alone, and they're looking, in these spaces where they should feel welcome and secure and celebrated, a public library or a school library, and they're seeing these ostensibly responsible adults like pulling the stories that mean so much to them off the shelves, hidden from view, and it just says to those kids that they don't matter, they don't belong. And I don't know. I mean, we're just like talking about, sort of like the old days. Like, I don't know if you remember what it was like being a teenager, but it's hard enough, when you're a teenager going through a lot of changes, trying on different identities, trying to find out how you want to move through the world. And to be in a situation where you are increasingly marginalized and isolated, even on top of that, is something that we wanted to address. So the response, thousands of emails. We've distributed over 6,500 cards. Wow. To young people in every state in the United States, Puerto Rico, DC. And, the kids are using the cards. I mean, they check out like 9,000, 10,000 books every month. And we're really proud to have them part of the BPL.
So the program's ongoing?
Program is ongoing, yes.
And if someone that's viewing our conversation wants more information, they go to the website for the Brooklyn Public Library, and there's detail about how to sign up for it there?
Yeah, they can look for Books Unbanned at Brooklyn Public Library. And it's a really strong campaign. It'll come right up. And they can just send us an email. They'll find information about how to send us an email. Tell us, what they're going through in their communities. It could be that, they're facing book bans or challenges in their community. It could be an access issue. Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of folks reaching out to us from Vermont and Minnesota even, where people, like kids are living in rural areas. Like it could be an hour's drive to the nearest library, and they can't drive, they can't get there, so they just need access to information, and we're there to provide it.
Nick smiled when he said Minnesota, because we were talking before the conversation about my visits to Minnesota over the years, and your growing up there. I think it's wonderful, and given our earlier conversation with another one of our honorees, Karissa O'Reilly, the experience in Carmel, and she's been standing up and being a heroine in that regard. But to see how, in the case of the Brooklyn Public Library, a very different culture here, and a response, though, to the same kind of challenge, and a very positive response. I really commend you for you and your team and how you've been really providing this service. I mean, it's really incredible. All across the country, every state, you said you've gotten emails of young people looking for that e-card. That's incredible.
Yeah, and I have to applaud Karissa as well for. I mean, this is also for the librarians and educators who are at the business end of a lot of these attacks. And they're just being, they're being criminalized, they're being harassed for doing their jobs really well. And providing some support for them as well is really important for this project, and standing shoulder to shoulder with them to push back. There's sort of this kind of like the loudest voices in the room sometimes get the most attention. I think that you mentioned this in your opening, and there are a lot of loud voices from very small people, I would say, who are in school board meetings or yelling at people across the reference desk, and that's has a very anti-democratic impact, right? So you're at a school board meeting, and all of a sudden this traditionally very staid and sort of procedural kind of community event turns into something where you're afraid to speak up, and afraid to speak your mind because it's just so contentious. So I applaud Karissa as well for having the courage to stand up and stand shoulder to shoulder with the teens who are being directly affected by it.
Well, we have a presentation for you. The first one is really for you and your team, Nick, and it's an Office of State Comptroller proclamation that really acknowledges the great history here, starting in 1896 at the Brooklyn Public Library, but certainly appropriate for our Pride celebration in 2023. This Books Unbanned program really has been a lifeline for young people all across the country. A very innovative and strong response to some bad things going on out there. So just keep up the great work in that regard. Really appreciate you for that. So.
Yeah, Tom, thank you so much.
But we have something else for you as well.
Okay.
So I think you saw with Crystal Hudson, our council member. So we have this unclaimed funds office that we talk about all the time, because people get separated from money for different reasons, old bank accounts, checks that weren't cashed. Somebody left you money in a life insurance policy that for whatever reason didn't get claimed. Often people move, and if money is in an account that's dormant after a certain period of time, it's turned over to the controller's office, what we call unclaimed funds. We keep the accounts in safekeeping until the owners find us or we find them. So it's individuals, there's also organizations. So we did a search for Brooklyn Public Library. So we've got $5,944.33 for the Brooklyn Public Library. So if the administration doesn't think the chief librarian isn't a revenue generating individual for the organization, you show them this big check, but it's a way for me to point out to all of our viewers, go to our controller office website, click on unclaimed funds, put your name in, friends, family, even deceased close relatives, organizations you're a part of. And I know the Brooklyn Public Library will put this almost $6,000 to good use.
Oh, this is amazing.
So very pleased to present it to you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for being part of our Pride celebration.
Yeah,
Nick Higgins,
absolutely.
Chief
My
Librarian,
pleasure.
Brooklyn Public Library.
Great. Thank you, Tom.